What's up, YouTube? It's like 2 a.m. my time and freezing cold at the time of recording this. Hence the sweatshirt and the toboggan or beanie or whatever you want to call it. And so yeah, we had a pretty sweet league online. As always, you can catch the full league if you want to see it over at twitch.tv/CntrlFreak. Link down in the description of the video, as well as link to the Twitter in case you want to know when the live streams are happening. That's the first place it gets updated. But we decided it's testing season. It's time to try out some of these new Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards, including, in this case, Tishana's Tidebinder, Bitter Triumph, and Stalactite Stalker. Can't forget that one, like I almost did. If you haven't seen any of these cards kind of broken down, I do actually have all three of these on my Lost Caverns of Ixalan set review for Shadow. It's on the YouTube channel. I kind of go over like what makes Stalactite Stalker and Bitter Triumph and Tidebinder, as well as a bunch of other cards, look potentially appealing in the Shadow Shell. So here we are trying to make good on our prediction there and see if any of these are actually worthwhile. If you don't know the cards, Stalactite Stalker, 1 mana for a 1/1 menace. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended, so if you had a permanent enter the graveyard from anywhere, it gets a +1/+1 counter. And then you can pay 2 and a black, sacrifice it. Target creature gets -X/-X, where X is Stalactite Stalker's power. Bitter Triumph, 1 and a black, instant, destroy target creature or planeswalker. It's an additional cost. You have to either lose 3 life or discard a card. And then Tishana's Tidebinder, 2 and a blue, 3/2 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, counter up to 1 target activated or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered that way, it loses all abilities. They're just gone for as long as Tishana's Tidebinder is on the battlefield. So, couple cool options. Wasn't really sure what kind of shell I wanted to put all these in, so I decided, you know what, we're going to run with Sultai. We're going to see how it goes. I've really liked Sultai in the past. It's my favorite color combination, so this is kind of me putting a bunch of new cards into a shell that I understand pretty well. So the basis, if you haven't seen Sultai Shadow before, you get the Shadow package with the Thoughtseize Shadows. In this case, the Bowmaster's Tarmogoyf, kind of like the core. You get blue for your counter magic, for Stubborn Denial, Spell Pierce, Drown in the Lock. We got some Ledger Shredders. Sideboard, we got Spreading Seas, Dress Down, Stern Scoldings, and Fluster Storms. And the green just kind of adds like the punch as well as the artifact and enchantment hate. So you get a lot of flexibility out of this color combination that you might not always see in other combinations. So pretty cool in that regard. The idea really is we got that old Grixis feel of get a threat, back it up with counter magic. But you have the advantage of being less reliable on things like the graveyard. You do have Tarmogoyf, but you're Tarmogoyf deck and not a Murktide Regent deck. So that's kind of the appeal of the green splash. In the sideboard, we got a few spicy pieces, like 2 copies of Autumnal Gloom. It's a 2 and a green enchantment that you can pay 1 black to mill the top card of your library. And then if you, on your end step, if you have Delirium, it transforms into a 4/4 with Trample and Hexproof. So able to dodge a lot of bounce effects, removal spells, especially out of decks like Scam and the Beanstalk decks, things like that. We've got a Terra Sunder, a Veil of Summer, Collector Oof, great for Tron, great for some of the One Ring decks riding around, an EE, an Unlicensed Hearse. And most importantly, out of the board, Gigantha as our companion. As you can see, no copies of Street Wraith, no Dismembers. So Gigantha, pretty free inclusion here. Gives us a little extra late game punch in the fair matchups. So let's go ahead and hop into some of the matches so you can see how it goes. As always, if you are enjoying the content and the commentary, feel free to like the video, leave a sub. Doesn't cost you anything, and we're only like 5 or 6 subs at the time of recording this away from our 1,000 sub goal on YouTube. As soon as we hit that, we're going to have a 12-hour Death Shadow stream. Or 12-hour stream. It's going to be predominantly Death Shadow, but 12-hour stream. And what I want to do, I'll just go ahead and like break it down before the video starts, or before the league starts. I want to take as many like shadow color combinations as I can. So mono black, Golgari, Orzhov, Rakdos, Dimir, not Jeskai, Grixis, Jund, Mardu, all that. And I want to make each shadow color combination have some identifying feature or like interaction for that combination, and just showcase as many different builds as we can. So like mono black would probably be a Hex Parasite build with Shadow and Shadow of Mortality and all that. And then we could have like Rakdos with Scourge of the Skyclaves and Battle Rages. We could have Golgari. I've got a sweet Golgari Saga Shadow build that I really like. But then we'll go past that, go like Mardu Shadow Blade. We can showcase Stoneforge Mystic and the Stoneforge Mystic package in with Shadow. And we could have like an Orzhov Reanimator Shadow, like Orzhov Charm. We could have Rakdos Scam Shadow, all these different variations. But I want to have like each one unique to the rest of them. So that's what we'll have going on. So if you aren't subbed, please consider doing that so we can hit that 1,000 sub goal. Back to the video. Opening hand, we are on the draw. First 7 doesn't do anything. We need threats. We need better interaction. Second 7, a little bit better. We've got Thoughtseize into Ledger Shredder, maybe a Tishana's Tidebinder at some point. Stalactite Stalker comes off the top. I might as well cast it now, because if I don't, then I'm going to be like off curve for the rest of the game. Unfortunately, this Beanstalk is a little rough. Like, this is kind of me wanting to play Stalactite Stalker because I put it in the deck. So I want to see how it does. I think Thoughtseize is probably the better play on turn 1 there. But again, I just like want to see how this card performs. So I'm going to play it out at the optimal time, which is turn 1. Unfortunately, it does get Furied. You have to recognize with this card, like, it's going to be small a lot of the time. You're really banking on having baubles or fetches for the first 3-4 turns. And it could be better in a Street Wraith build. But here we are. Can't control that part. We do get to kill down Teferi. Opponent does have a double ice here to tap down both of our Tarmogoyfs, which is, I guess, fine. Like, we do just have 2 lethal Tarmogoyfs. And we get to Tishana's Tidebinder, an Omnath trigger. So we stop them from drawing a card. Omnath now does not gain them life or produce mana. Unfortunately, Solitude still draws 2 cards. And then it draws into a Leyline Binding that draws 2 cards. And I'm sure y'all are all sick of seeing the Beanstalk decks from now. Or at this point. I think there's a ban and reserved announcement coming up in like 3 weeks. So we'll see if something gets changed up. Either way, sideboarding against Scam. The big things are like, if it says counter, it's probably coming in. Engineered Explosives comes in to help deal with the One Rings. Terra Sun, or not with One Rings, with the Beanstalks. Terra Sunder comes in, deals with Binding, deals with Beanstalk. If they're playing the One Ring, deals with that. Fury to take down our dudes. Like, I know I'm playing that Shadow out into the Fury, but there's just no guarantee that I'm going to find something to get Shadow bigger. So I kind of want to go ahead and just like take the 2 for 1 before they're able to potentially get a Beanstalk down and then go for a Cascade or go for an Evoke. Especially while they're kind of not showing a lot of resources. So we bobble them. We see the 3rd land finally. So we know they got Ardent Plea. Got to Spell Pierce that. And then hope to just like untap and land Autumnal Gloom, land Shadow, something like that. Which thankfully Misty lets us do. Get down both of our dudes. As I talked about in the video, or at the start of the video, Autumnal Gloom on your instep automatically triggers. If you got Delirium, it just becomes a 4/4 with Trample and Hexproof. What's better than one of them? 2 of them. Can't be Solituded, can't be Furied, Leyline Binding, Teferi Bounced, any of that good stuff. If you're against one of those Beanstalk opponents, it's sideboarding into like, what's it called? Sanctifier on Vec or Auroch Champion or something. It swings through those just fine. Again, we could have played Slaktite Stalker. I still think Thoughtseize is the better turn 1 play here. Which is a little unfortunate because obviously the longer we wait on Stalker, the worse it gets. I'm just going to go for the ice. We've got Bowmaster in response. They've got a Dead and Gone, which was not on my radar. I don't know if I've seen Dead and Gone out of these lists before, but pretty good play from them. Fortunately, we do get like a Stalker that grows a little bit. Get an army token, so we had a Stalker that grew a little bit. Now this is fantastic for me. My opponent ditching a Solitude and a Leyline Binding to stop me from killing it to Teferi when I still just get to like double threat here or triple threat. That's phenomenal on my end. Finding another Stalker. I don't have their hand pulled up, but I know their last card right now is Force of Vigor. There we go. So that's why I'm not Thoughtseizing. Is like I don't care about the Force of Vigor. I want to give them a chance to find like a Solitude or something. Or an Omnath, like so. So again, last card's Force of Vigor. Again, we top deck a Thoughtseize and get to rip a live spell. So feeling positive here. We get to knock out Teferi. We didn't knock out Teferi. We just hit them with Goyf. Hit Teferi for 1, so we don't have to worry about them like bouncing. Now we have to knock out Teferi so we can hold up Drown in the Lock. Not that that's like the worst deal in the world, but end up sniping that one behind a lucky Drown. On to round 2. Pretty good hand on the play, or on the draw, sorry. Turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Shadow potentially. Opponent leads on Sunken Ruin, so I assume they've got a Lorien revealed. Yep. But pretty weak hand overall. Fatal Push, Force, Subtlety. They got another Lorien revealed on top. Take the Fatal Push, so if they want to like Subtlety our Shadow, they're basically going empty-handed. That's pretty nice for us. Another Thoughtseize to take Lorien revealed, which means they've got Force, Subtlety, and a Watery Grave. Tried to make them go empty-handed by subtletying our Shadow. They don't fall for it, so we just got to do the boring play out Shadow, attack them in the face thing. Now, I could play the other Shadow, but my concern is that they have 4th land and 1 ring. So I wanted to hold up the Tidebinder to be able to stifle the 1 ring when it comes in. But Preordained to the top means probably a Bowmaster. But that's fine because we've got Shadow. That gets the Force and the Subtlety out of hand. Put the Shadow right back on top. And now we're just Open a prey with the Tishana's Tidebinder. Let's talk about sequencing with this Tidebinder in the ring real quick. So when the One Ring comes into play, it creates a trigger that gives them protection until their next turn. That automatically goes on when it enters the battlefield. Now, you could respond to that trigger with Tishana's Tidebinder and potentially like shut the ring off completely. However, your opponent can tap the One Ring in response to you targeting the protection trigger to still get to draw a card. Now, they don't get protection, but they do get to draw the card. I could do that, or I could wait to see if my opponent draws a card and then Tishana's the draw trigger, so they get protection for a turn, but they don't get to draw a card. If I could have presented lethal right here and actually had my opponent dead, like I've got 6, 9 potentially off the Shadow, plus 12 off the Tidebinder, I can get the Bowmaster out of the way. If I was presenting lethal, then I would Tishana's the protection trigger. But because I couldn't, then I'm just going to Tishana's the draw trigger, so they don't get to draw a card, and then go to my turn and figure it out from there. Because now it becomes, okay, you've got one draw step to find, like, damnation right here. Don't get Tishana's anymore, or you don't get One Ring anymore, and opponent whiffs, go to game 2. Sideboarding against blue-black control. A lot of the spot removals coming out. Not really any good targets. Some people were asking about Stern Scolding come in. I'm not a big fan of Stern Scolding because it only deals with Bowmaster. If you also see like Snapcaster, it makes a little more sense. But if you only see Bowmaster and then like Murktide or Shieldred, then I don't think it's good enough. So elect to play the shock land here because my opponent's probably playing Drown in the Lock, and I don't want to make this Shredder a valid target yet. But here, if they go for Drown, like so, we've got Flusterstorm. This is a pretty funny turn here because we go to Flusterstorm the Drown, put all the copies on the Drown. Opponent Flusterstorms back on our Flusterstorm. So they're flustering our Flusterstorm, which is flustering their Drown in the Lock. They actually end up misclicking here and don't counter all the copies of our Flusterstorm. So we had one going through that would have countered the Drown, or that does counter the Drown. My opponent typed into chat something along the lines of like, whoops. And I said back, and if you don't believe me for whatever reason, you can go back to the VOD on Twitch and double check it. They said something like whoops, and I suggested like, hey, I can just not attack with the Ledger Shredder, but I can't do anything about the triggers that it causes. Like, all I can do is not attack with it. I can't make it so that it doesn't have these double draw triggers. But I also could have just Drown in the Lock there, Drown in the Lock. And you'll see why that becomes relevant. Like, if this wasn't my Flusterstorm, then I would Drown the Drown. But because they countered their own Fluster, or didn't counter my Fluster, I didn't. And they end up playing out a Murktide here, plus an EE, trigger Ledger Shredder, and I throw away the Drown. So I would have had a Drown target, would have countered their Drown, and then Drown would have been off anyway. So, like, I think it all worked out the same. if any of that makes any sense. Counterspell on top of their library. Get to see my love of Tear Asunder here by letting me take out this Murktide. End up ditching a Shadow because I'm like, all right, I'm pretty threat heavy. Why not keep the threats that do something instead of the threat that doesn't? Might have been a little greedy, but on the flip side, I do get to Tidebinder a Shieldred trigger. And so now Shieldred doesn't do anything. That's pretty dope. Take a Lorien Revealed. I could have just taken the counter spell. Like, it all just depends on if they hit a land. If they hit the land, I'm glad I took the Lorien Revealed. If they don't hit the land, then I would have preferred taking the counter spell. Either way, eat the counter spell. Put in some blockers for the Shieldred. Got 2 cards we don't know about. They got 1 card we don't know about. We're just going to hope it's not Counterspell and go for the Tear Asunder on the Shieldred. And, of course, another 1 ring. They choose not to activate it. Picking up a stub is okay. It's not great. We can stub like a Damnation. Now we're gonna counter this 1 ring activation. I said we could stub a Damnation, not if they find the 5th land. So Tishana's down. 1 ring is back to being unlocked. Like I said, it only stops the 1 ring, or stops the artifact or planeswalker or whatever from activating if Tishana's is still on the board. Play out Shredder, Shield, or Shredder Turok. Ditch the Stubborn Denial because I can't stub anything anyway if I double threat. And if I make the Shredder a 2/4, then I give myself the chance of just killing them. Bowmaster down my Shredder. Back in. Pass the turn back. We are currently winning the race. And they get to go up to 4 cards to find a way to kill me right now or play another ring. But I guess they can't play another ring because I had stub. They end up Archmage's Charm, targeting me to try to draw off Bowmaster. We've got the stub to counter that. And things work out somehow. I think opponent was a little frustrated over the Flusterstorm play. They weren't a bad sport or anything, but either way, round 3, turn 1, Sunhome Amulet. We've got not a great hand against Amulet Titan. Just going to try to hit a Dryad. They go for Azusa and go into combat, so we're immediately going to Fatal Push inside of combat. Just in case they had another land and accidentally click through. Turn 3, Tarmogoyf down, stub up so we can counter a 1 ring. We can counter a Summoner's Pact. Most importantly, we can counter a 1 ring. Which they are down to 3 cards. Yeah, pretty low count. Thoughtseize is an excellent pickup. See, Primeval Titan, Summoner's Pact, Cultivator, Colossus. Yeah, so we take the Primeval Titan. They top deck a 1 ring. Counter that. This was a punt on my part. So I've got 2 options. I can Thoughtseize, hold up Bitter Triumph, or I can Shredder Thoughtseize. I kind of made a play before I did the math. So I was thinking Thoughtseize and then Bitter Triumph to kill whatever dude they play. If they find a bounce land, play Cultivator Colossus, kill the Cultivator Colossus. Like I said, I didn't do the math first, or I would have realized, oh, if they copy Amulet with Mycosynth Gardens and then play a bounce land, that's only 6 lands. The 2 that they have in play, 4 that they make off the bounce land. So they can't Colossus off that. If they just top deck a bounce land and play it, still just 6 mana, can't Colossus. So I should have played the Ledger Shredder first, and then Thought Seized the Summoner's Pact, which actually ends up being extremely important because I Thought Seized the Pact, hit them for 6 down to 9, play the Ledger Shredder. If I had Thought Seized first and triggered the Shreddered first and then Thought Seized, I would have drawn into this Bowmaster, thrown it away, triggered the Descend on the Stalactite Stalker, and put a 1/1 counter on the Ledger Shredder. And so my opponent here would have gone to 0 exactly instead of 2. And it would have cut out a big potential out of a top deck bounce land here. Which I think I would have killed him through a bounce land anyway with Bowmaster. They could have just not triggered their Colossus. But obviously pointing out that they would have been actually dead instead of likely dead is important. Sideboarding against Amulet, bringing in the Engineered Explosives, Terra Sunders. I think I ended up bringing in Stern Scolding, because it does hit Arboreal Grazer, Azusa, Dryad. Opponent shows us the enchantment Spelunking. Let's talk about that real quick. It's a new enchantment from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set. 2 and a green. It says something like when it enters, you can put a land from your hand into play. If it's a cave, you gain 4 life. And then lands you control enter the battlefield untapped. I thought it would be a Nombo with Amulet, but apparently Amulet still works with it. I don't know why. Apparently they're both replacement effects, but I thought Amulet was just a trigger. So if somebody's got an explanation for that, I'd be happy to hear it. But this is sweet. So opponent goes for a bounce land, copies their Amulet, goes for a bounce land. We Tidebinder the Amulet untap trigger, which means one of these amulets is just completely dead now. We have another Tidebinder to potentially hit the other amulet, but I decided to just blow the amulets up and not deal with that. Get the Thoughtseize away a Pact. And it does find another amulet, so us being the rude people we are, we're going to Tidebinder that one too. Because, get out of here. So they still have to pick up a land for the Growth Chamber, but they don't get the option to untap anything. So the hope is that I can just kill them on my next turn, so that even though they have Summoner's Pact, they can't pack for a Dryad and start Valakutting anything. They don't have enough lands. They can't pack for a Titan because they can't have a bounce land come into play and untap, because they ain't got no Amulet no mo. And really sweet 2-0 there on to round number 4. Really good hand on the play. Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf, Spell Pierce. Can't ask for much more. Except I can't ask to not play against mono black Coffers. They top deck a Thoughtseize and are able to take our Goyf. We top deck a Tidebinder, which has a sweet, juicy little target in this Field of Ruin. Shadow top decks, another great one. So now we get down a threat. They go for the Field of Ruin. We get to Tidebinder it. Keeps a swamp off the battlefield on their side. Stops them from strip mining one of our lands. Edict is fine. We'll get rid of this thing that's already done its job. Whatever. Back in for 5. Double 1 mana counter up. The more I play this current list, the more I think this basic forest needs to be a basic island instead. You know they've got a bowmaster, so might as well just start chunking away at that. Really, the most annoying thing about bowmaster is the double blocks. But as far as like actually being impactful as a threat against Sultai, not that much. Double Cling to Dust. Decide to spell pierce the back half of it just to make sure they're tapped out. And they can't have some follow-up like Fatal Push or Children's Edict, something like that. Decide to high roll, counter the stub. They end up having nothing. Really glad they didn't have a follow-up Damnation or One Ring or something. But even if they did and we let the Fatal Push resolve, stub would have been offline for the next thing. Coif was only a 3-4. So wouldn't have been able to do anything about it anyway. Back up to that Thoughtseize real quick. Come on. All right. So Thoughtseize and see double Shieldred, Karn, Fatal Push, Demolition Field. End up taking the Troll just to stop like the guaranteed third land drop. Obviously, they can still find a third land naturally, but I'm going to make them just draw lands instead of drawing live things. I think that's a little bit better for me. And as we see here, they do start by whiffing. So we can fire off a Bowmaster, just like make them commit something into this, which they do. Then we're just going overboard with threats. Trying to put as much pressure on as we possibly can before our opponent can find like lands and damnation. And they decide to scoop it up to our Autumnal Gloom. Those threatening gentlemen in all of Modern. They can't stop him. They can only hope to contain him as we go to match number 5. Then opening 7 with no lands. 6 with 1 land. Bobble ourselves. If I saw a land, I'd not play anything and keep it on top. Unfortunately, we did not see a land. We get to Thoughtseize into a Rakdos Goryo's deck. So probably like Craggenwick, Cremator, all that fun stuff. And we're going to sit here not seeing a land. This is like the worst thing possible you want to see when playing for the trophy for the 5-0 on Magic Online is, hey, I don't have lands. I'm not finding lands. I've got a whole bunch of things that do essentially nothing if my opponent goes for a Cremator. Or if my opponent goes for much of anything. We know they have the Bolt. Can't play out the Shadow. They do throw away this Goryo's Vengeance, which I thought was kind of bizarre. And follow it up with a Cookbook, so who knows what the thought process is here. Either way, we do find the second land. We've got Fatal Push for the Reflection. We've got Shadow to start cracking in. They decide to go for the Chump Block. We've got Drown and Lock up. We've got Tidebinder up. And it sacks the Cookbook to get back Bowmasters. Decided to Tishana's the Cookbook. Mainly because I don't want them going fetch, play Bowmaster, ping me down to 3, and then have Bolt that I have to play around for like the rest of the game. But instead, they untap and just have like Craggenwick, 2 unknowns, probably 2 big fatty dudes, and end up killing us with a Cremator. Sideboarding, bring in Collector Oof to stop some of these cookbook shenanigans if we can. Bring in any Grave Hate. So in this case, Unlicensed Hearse. Brought in Engineered Explosives to potentially fight over cookbooks. We see a Saga game 2. Which makes sense with cookbook. But either way, we're just going to try to hit our opponent in the face as fast as we can. They do go for Bowmaster on our Oof. I think I should have just Fatal Pushed this. I really wanted like the threats on board. But I should have just Fatal Pushed, kept up Tishana. I don't really care about countering the Saga. But I could have countered the Profane Tutor or stifled the Suspend trigger on the Profane Tutor. But either way, we do have some Tishanas, so if they go for Underworld Cookbook, they still get to ditch the card because it's part of the cost, but we would stop them from future cookbook activations. Here, I messed up. I missequenced because I just forgot that Haywire Might has the death trigger. I Tishana's first and then killed the Haywire Might. I should have killed the Haywire Might and then Tishana's the death trigger just to stop them from gaining the 2 life. So Crack-a-Peat land, they respond with flashing in Bowmaster. We respond with Tishana's the Bowmaster trigger. So that shuts off the Bowmaster abilities, and we get to draw our card safely, so that's cool. Down to 9 life. They are smart enough to block the Tishana's that was shutting off the Bowmaster, but I'm smart enough to draw Tarmogoyf and hold up Drown in the lock. So who's the real winner here? Thoughtseize respond by killing the token. Attack in. And it's got another Bowmaster. Bowmaster number 3. You might say opponent is a master of drawing the bows. If that was your assumption, you would be correct. They got a kick for or flipped reflection. We've got 2 lethal attackers. They've got a food token. Discard a Leyline of Sanctity. Good to know about. And we pick up the win a turn later. On to game number 3. So game number 3 of match 5. Playing for the trophy. Opening hand. Anything interesting about that hand? It had Unlicensed Hearse, but on the draw with a Hearse means if they go turn 1 Cookbook, turn 2 Goryo's Vengeance, it's too slow. Stalactite Stalker, not really the threat that Gotham City needs. So we mulligan. This hand, I don't want to go down lower. I just want to hope that they don't have something on turn 1. Hope they don't have a Cookbook on 1. Profane Tutor gets suspended. We find a Tarmogoyf. I do like a Tarmogoyf here. So I ended up getting the basics because they got basic Swamp and I didn't want to get got by Blood Moon. I don't know if they're actually playing Blood Moon or not. I've seen some Craggenwick decks play Blood Moon. But I don't know if the Saga variants choose not to play it. But I kind of figured hey, I can afford to play around Blood Moon, so I'm going to. Then here I give my opponent 1 draw step to potentially hit a Cookbook before I'm just holding up Drown in the Lock. They do not hit the Cookbook, so go back to our turn. Attack in, make a dude, cool. I think I should have gone ahead and attacked with the Bowmaster as well. But from now on, if we can afford to, we're not tapping off of Drown in the Loch or Stubborn Denial. Elect to Stubborn Denial that instead of Drown in the Loch so that I can still use this Drown to knock out a Construct token if need be. Then attack in. What I was kind of hoping was that my opponent would double block the Shadow so I could fetch shock, deal 4 damage to the first construct, 3 to the second. Second dies to state-based actions. They didn't go for it. This turn they do. This is the bait turn where I hope they'll do exactly this. Go for the cookbook. We Tidebinder the cookbook trigger. I could Drown in the Loch one of the tokens, but I just don't think it matters here. If their cookbooks cut off, if their 2 draws are like a way to deal with Tidebinder into Emrakul, Goryo's Vengeance, then putting Emrakul in the graveyard would give me the second card for Drown in the Loch to counter Goryo's Vengeance. So I'm not too worried about that. Unfortunately, we counter the Tutor and they still have the Damnation, but we've got a Giganta. We've got an Elk. Honestly, like, who can compete with that? Second for 5. Opponent cookbooks. You got it. Gain up to 7, lose down to 2. So now Giganta is lethal next turn. Play out our Ledger Shredder. Opponent draws, does the math, decides there's no point in continuing, and they end up scooping up the game to you, boy. There we go. I'm gonna say as soon as I decide to move the cursor. But that's Sultai. That's the end of the video. No. Let's talk about some of the thoughts and notes here. First off, the most obvious note, I think, is Stalactite Stalker was horrible. I wish I could say something nicer about it. I don't have anything. It competed on the curve horribly on turn 1. Like, if I ever had a Fatal Push or a Thoughtseize or something, if I had Thoughtseize, I always wanted to Thoughtseize over Stalker. If I had a Fatal Push or Stubborn Denial matchup dependent, I might want to hold that up instead. If I bobbled and saw something I wanted with a fetch land, then I didn't want to crack the fetch to play Stalker. And then after, like, turn 2 or 3, it just went so downhill in value so quickly. It was so often a 1-mana 1/1 that never got any bigger, never had it bigger than a 2/2 that entire league. Really, really rough. Don't care for it, at least not in this shell. We'll try it out in other shells at some point, but didn't care for it in this shell. It's also a like 1/1 or 2/2 or even a 3/3 in a world full of Furies and Fire and Ices and that stuff. And yeah, just not about it. The MVP of the league was definitely just Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf, which is one of the big reasons to play a variation like this or Jund Shadow, because that does provide a whole lot of consistency. Ledger Shredder was solid. Bitter Triumph, we never cast the entire league. Tishana's, though. Tishana's was nuts. Like, we stifled Omnath, Shieldred, the One Ring, a Field of Ruin, a Cookbook, 2 Amulets. I'm sure there's something else. A Bowmaster. Like, Tishana's did so much work. I could see fitting a 3rd copy in here, maybe going up to like the 19th land. So maybe those 4 Stalactite Stalkers become like 3rd Tishana's, 4th Bowmaster, 4th Drown, 19th land, something like that. But yeah, really, really impressed by that card. Bowmaster was fine. Ledger Shredder was fine. Having some flash threats is pretty sweet. Out of the sideboard, Autumnal Gloom was excellent. Got us the win against the 4-color opponent round 1. We got a win with it, not because of it, but with it against Mono Black. We saw it against Blue Black. Could have played it. Chose not to. Yeah, that's about all I can say. Like, sideboard, it needs some alignment work. I do need to do a little more work on figuring out what I want to board in, what I want to board out in some matchups, and kind of like one-for-oneing that out so that it's a little cleaner. Main deck, probably want to swap the basic forest for the basic island. The forest was in there mostly because I started with Sultai as a Traverse the Ulvenwald build, and being able to get the basic forest for Traverse to be able to traverse for the basic swamp under like a Blood Moon is really, really big. But if you play enough like Stubborn Denials and Pierces and Drowns, you can probably interact with Blood Moon enough. And if you have the blue to cast your counter magic as well as like all of your threats except for Goyf under the Blood Moon, then it could be good enough. But either way, we'll keep messing around with it, trying out some different configurations. Hopefully you'll catch us over on one of the live streams to see how it's going in person. Otherwise, hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.